The pick and roll is the bread and butter of modern offense. It has become ubiquitous. Even the Spurs, whose motion offense includes a ton of off-ball screens, handoffs, and cuts, amidst an improvisational blur of ball and player movement, use some form of the pick and roll on most possessions, and are finishing more possessions with the pick and roll ball handler this year than ever before. That represents a significant change over the last 5 seasons. In 2015 and 16, the Spurs finished less than 14% of their plays with the pick and roll ball handler, and only 5 teams in the league were over 20%. So far this year, there are 10 teams doing that, with 6 more less than a percent away, including the Spurs. As a league-wide trend, that shift makes sense as teams seek to maximize the value of hyper-skilled perimeter players at a time when defenses have adjusted to take advantage of rule changes that make interior play more challenging. Focusing in on the Spurs, though, shows a team that appears, at least at first glance, to be ill-equipped to follow suit. None of the team's lead guards combine the dizzying playmaking and off-the-bounce deep threat of the league's best ball handlers. It's no coincidence that the Mavericks, Celtics, and Trailblazers are 1, 2, and 3 in points per possession for the pick-and-roll ball handler, with Luka Doncic, Kemba Walker, and Damian Lillard using the bulk of their possessions. But still, the Spurs sit 12th in the league in points per possession and 12th in frequency. Only 4 teams finish more possessions with the pick-and-roll ball handler more efficiently, which is perhaps a bit surprising given the reputations of the team and the players involved. So let's take a deeper look at the 3 players who use the majority of the Spurs pick-and-roll possessions: DeMar DeRozan, Dejounte Murray, and Derrick White. DeMar leads the team, finishing almost 7 possessions per game in the pick and roll, followed by Dejounte and Derrick, who each use a little less than 4. In terms of scoring, Derrick is the most efficient by far, averaging 1 point per possession. Only 10 players in the league have used more pick and roll possessions more efficiently. DeMar is less efficient but carries a heavier load, managing a very respectable 0.92 points per possession on more than twice as many possessions. Just like last year, DeMar is an average scorer among the small group of players who use as many possessions as he does. Last season, he was 8th out of the 17 players who used more than 500 possessions in the pick and roll, and this year he's 15th out of the 27 players who've already used more than 150. Dejounte, though, has really struggled to score in the pick and roll. He's used about the same number of possessions as Derrick, but scored about half as many points, which gives him a solid case as the worst pick and roll ball handler in the league. Without even needing to check the tape, you can see that Dejounte shoots too poorly and turns the ball over too often to really be effective. But in each case, the tape can help us better understand how the player uses the action. The first thing to note is that the Spurs use way more pick and rolls every game than are captured in the Synergy play type data available on NBA.com, because that only captures the action that finishes each possession. The Spurs go to some version of a pick and roll at least twice as often as what's reflected there. For Derrick, a lot of those are early offense drag screens, often double drags, that look to take advantage of the defense before it gets set. He appears even more conservative with his decision-making at this point in the possession than usual, only attacking if he sees a clear advantage. One reason why his points per possession and turnover rates are so good. DeMar gets some of those too, but most of his early offense actions are pistol screens on the wings designed to get him a mismatch to attack. Those possessions typically turn into drives, isolations, or post-ups, where DeMar has had a field day with smaller guards this year. Dejounte, though, doesn't find himself in position to flow into early offense actions like these very often, because he's mostly either out ahead of the pack in transition or walking it up. That's not necessarily a bad thing, he's very good in transition, but it's important context for understanding Dejounte's comparatively poor efficiency in the pick and roll. To control for that a little, we'll focus on the classic small-big pick and roll in the half court, which is probably what most people think of when we talk about pick and rolls anyway. That means primarily we're talking about LaMarcus Aldridge or Jakob Poeltl setting the screen. LaMarcus almost always pops and Jakob pretty much always rolls, giving each pairing of screener and ball handler a different dynamic. DeMar, Dejounte, and Derrick all benefit from having LaMarcus as an outlet, and they rack up assists on these easy throwback passes. LaMarcus is shooting over 53% on catch-and-shoot twos this season, which is incredible. It means that when any ball handler draws anything more than a hedge off the screen, it's money in the bank. Even if LaMarcus regresses back to the 49.1% he hit on those shots last year, it's still a very good half-court possession for the Spurs, who are averaging just .941 points per possession in the half-court this year, per cleaning the glass, which is 17th in the league. LaMarcus' shooting is good, but his two-point accuracy isn't nearly enough to force a perimeter rotation and open up a shooter. Some teams just let him shoot, while others will have the closest defender wave a hand in his direction. At the same time, DeMar, Derrick, and Dejounte aren't dangerous enough from behind the arc to warrant a hard show or switch. For For the most part, they all see the same conservative drop coverage the Spurs use, with late switches when necessary. DeMar is rarely in a hurry as he works the screen and feels out the defense. We've already seen him happily drag his trailing defender away from LaMarcus to get a wide open look when that's the right play, but he'll also immediately attack an out of position or backpedaling big. DeMar is a good passer, if not especially creative, who can read the entire floor and get the ball anywhere it needs to go, though the pick and pop with LaMarcus rarely produces more than a momentary opening anywhere else on the floor. The speed and accuracy of DeMar's passes, more often than not, is what creates the advantage. Marco Bellinelli's game-tying shot against the Kings was very much an outlier in that sense. The Spurs exploited the Kings' willingness to leave LaMarcus alone and try to stay at home on shooters. When DeMar rejected the pick, the Kings had no one covering the big Texan as he set the screen that sprang Marco. Dejounte is much less patient, perhaps because he's fast enough to blow through even minor mistakes and drop coverage, or maybe it's just the intemperance of youth. As he gets stronger and continues to improve his ability to finish through contact, he may eventually be able to dictate a change in defensive strategy. For now, though, teams have been content to let Dejounte attack, confident that he can't hurt them with his pull-up jumper. He's making just 38% of his pull-up twos so far this year, and that he'll turn the ball over often enough to offset his impressive forays to the rim. That has limited his ability to generate offense for others, as almost all of his assists in the pick and pop to LaMarcus for those long catch-and-shoot jumpers. Derrick isn't quite as quick as Dejounte, but is far more crafty. Like DeMar, he's extremely patient and can draw out the action to increase the pressure on the defense, frequently finding a late opening for easy points. His judgment is typically excellent, though the team would likely be better off if he were a bit more aggressive on the attack. With Julius Randle switched onto him here, he should probably snake this pick and roll as LaMarcus rolls down the left side of the lane, but picks the ball up in maybe the worst spot he can instead, making the entry to LaMarcus nearly impossible. It's not that he's too cautious, though it often appears that way. It's more that he doesn't yet realize how good of a scoring option he is, so he passes up decent opportunities in hopes of finding better ones that never come. He also has a strange tendency to pick the ball up in awkward positions like this, though he seems to have a knack for turning even those mistakes into buckets. But when he's aggressive, Derrick can be a game changer. This is only loosely a pick and pop because Paul George just obliterates any chance of Derrick getting to the screen. But Derrick uses that to get a slight advantage and drags George all the way down to the paint before drawing help from Kawhi Leonard. Then somehow reads Lou Williams moving to cover the corner through George, and then somehow gets the ball to Bryn on the right wing, throwing the ball opposite his direction of movement and puts it right on the numbers. Seriously, look at where this ball arrives. When paired with a rolling big, though, whether that's Jacob or one of LaMarcus's rare rim runs, all three are more dangerous. Though without LaMarcus as an outlet, those actions have been a bit more likely to fail than the relatively safe pick and pop. Still, a hard roll puts a ton of pressure on the defense, like forcing this single side tag that gets Bryn Forbes an easy look from the right wing, a play the Spurs should definitely run more often. But it can also wreak havoc on the weak side, forcing one defender to zone up between two shooters. DeMar is great at identifying the help and firing a spot-on bullet to whoever's open. Dejounte isn't quite as adept, but can definitely recognize the opportunity. It's not often you catch Marcus Smart sleeping, especially when the decision is in front of him. He doesn't quite have a feel for the weak side help yet, though, so regardless of whether his big pops or rolls, if Dejounte's not looking at the help defender, well, it's not good. Derrick, on the other hand, might be the best of the bunch here. He's made some incredible passes out of the pick and roll this season. The way he looks off Jordan Poole here to get Bryn open is a thing of beauty. But the roll doesn't just open up shooters, it also forces the big in drop coverage to cut off access to the rim while keeping an eye on the roller. DeMar and Derrick have both used that to get to the basket multiple times this season. Unfortunately, that hasn't resulted in too many points for Big Yak. DeMar has just one assist, Jacob is the roll man. Derrick has only managed one too. Dejounte, on the other hand, has three, despite having spent much less time on the court with Jacob than either of them. That could change dramatically, though, if Derrick continues to knock down pull-up threes. He's only taken 20 so far this season, and 62 in his career, but he's hitting 40% so far. That will certainly come down, but if he shoots enough of them, it will force bigs to get closer to the level of the screen, which will do wonders for what Jacob and others can do on the roll. All in all, it's pretty clear the Spurs should weight their offense a little more towards the roll instead of the pop. LaMarcus isn't as remarkable in that role as he is shooting a 20-footer, but the impact it has on the rest of the floor easily makes up for that. At the same time, the Spurs should ask him to pop behind the three-point line a little more often. A wide-open catch-and-shoot three for LaMarcus is a much better outcome than a pull-up jumper from DeMar or Derrick, much less Dejounte. That would put more stress on the defense and give each a better menu of options whenever they run it. Now, that was just the big small pick and roll or pop. I've covered in a previous video what DeMar can do with a pistol screen. He's been a monster in early offense this year. And the Spurs have run small screens for him at the top of the key from time to time too. Though he hasn't been quite as successful in that arrangement, it's still a very good action. We didn't spend any time on the double drag either, a setup that Derrick is far and away the Spurs' best option to run. And we didn't focus in on the high pick and roll either, something DeMar is already great at and something else the team ought to run more often. It's also a play Dejounte has the tools to excel at as well. But back to the small big pick and roll we covered here, it's easy to see that Derrick should be using more of these possessions. It's important to remember though that Derrick and Dejounte already get a lot of pick and roll opportunities that don't lead anywhere. The opportunities Derrick passes up are typically good decisions, but an important part of getting him more shots is changing his internal calculus on when to attack and when to reset. When it comes to endgame situations, obviously, there's not a lot of room for an action that goes nowhere. Since DeMar is more consistently able to find an exploitable advantage, the Spurs put him in that action over and over again late in games. He doesn't produce especially high-value shots every time, but as many people have said of both DeMar and LaMarcus as players, he raises the floor of the possession. That might not be the right coaching move, it's too risk-averse for my taste, but it's at least understandable. Still, regardless of how they allocate those crunch time possessions, it's clear DeMar and Derrick are driving the Spurs' success in the pick and roll, and that Dejounte has a ways to go to catch up. Alright, make sure you like and subscribe and share and all the other wonderful things you do with videos you like. Thanks for watching.